Hi, and welcome back to the AITX Community Podcast, the show where we go deep with some of the most interesting AI engineers, entrepreneurs, researchers, and operators across the state of Texas. I'm your host, Jake O'Shea. Our mission is to pull back the curtain on what's really happening in AI in a way that's accessible and engaging for anyone excited about the future of this technology. We specifically focus on Texas because we believe that the Texas engineering community is seriously underrated. People here are building incredible products and solving difficult technical challenges, and our hope is that this podcast helps expose some of that exciting work with the rest of the world. Today's guest is Jade Wang, an engineer, startup founder, hacker house pioneer, and prolific angel investor. Our conversation spans Jade's personal journey, immigrating to the US and learning to code, her experiences running some legendary Bay Area hacker houses, how she got started building developer community at Meteor, and eventually her founding of the company Sandstorm, which was later acquired by Cloudflare. We talk a lot about her approach to angel investing, her views on the evolution of startups in the AI era, and the role of intuition, agency, and empathy in building technology and the future. Jade's an incredibly successful entrepreneur, engineer, and investor, and is representative of some of the incredible people building right here in Texas. It was an absolute pleasure to get to interview her and go really deep on some of the topics close to her heart and hear her story. Now, without further ado, please enjoy this deep dive with Jade Wang. Sweet. We are live.
All
Jade,
right.
thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So I think to start, would love to give any listeners some context on you, your history in engineering, just kind of your personal story. So to start, maybe tell me a little bit about what life was like growing up and what first got you involved with engineering.
So I came to the U.S. when I was 5. My father was a foreign exchange student studying physics, but he was actually more interested in computer science, and so he did 2 masters in the same 2 years because he only had funding for 2 years.
Okay.
So that's how long his scholarship lasted. And then, like many students of that era, he decided to build a life here. So both my parents came here, and there was a company that was sponsoring him for a visa and sponsoring us for a green card, and so we ended up staying. When I was a kid, I think it was about like 12 or 13 when my father started teaching me to program. It was while he was working at Hewlett-Packard, and I remember the day he came home because Carly Fiorina had just became CEO, and he brought home, I'm not sure if it was like Fortune or Forbes, with her on the cover. And he said, all right, we're going to start programming.
What was like programming language that you used? Like what was programming?
It was
like?
QBasic.
Okay.
Back in those days. Actually, I remember when he and a buddy of his worked on this sort of implemented in QBasic a real-time chat, and it's funny. It doesn't work the same way that you expect chat to today, where you enter a message and it just there's a share. No, it was like editing 2 WordPerfect documents side by side, and you see all of each other's typos.
Well, interesting. Very cool.
Yeah.
So you grew up, came here when you were 5 in California?
No, Central Illinois.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I spent the first 17 years of my life planning to be a concert pianist.
Okay.
And then I rage quit when I was 17 because number 1, 2, and 3 in my age group were invited to play at the White House, and I was number 4.
That's brutal.
But I had computer science to pivot into. And so between my mom's influence and my dad's influence, that round, Dad won.
Yeah. Mom was a musician, I'm guessing then?
Musician and other I mean, she also ended up getting a master's in computer science, but she made me do her homework.
Is this Illinois Urbana-Champaign? Is that the university?
Oh, my dad was originally at Southern Illinois, and then we went to Decatur, Illinois, and then Chicago.
Okay. Interesting. I asked
Yeah.
because I know a friend of mine went to Urbana-Champaign, and she was telling me that it's like the birthplace of the internet.
Yeah. Actually, my dad had a real rough time choosing between a teaching position at Urbana-Champaign that didn't sponsor the green card, but that he would rather have done, versus a programming position with a small company that couldn't get a programmer otherwise, but did sponsor us for a green card. And so green card was the choice.
Yeah. Well, makes sense.
Yeah.
So grew up in Illinois. Where did you end up going to school for undergrad?
Stanford for undergrad.
Stanford. Studying computer science?
Started off in computer science and then pivoted into biology.
Okay.
With a focus in neuroscience.
Okay. And what kind of led to that shift towards, I guess, physical sciences away from computer science?
Well, it was actually just going to a Robert Sapolsky lecture, and I at that moment I just made the decision I have to go work for him, and so I worked in his lab, and did research, and what I really wanted was to make progress in understanding how humans think. And by the time I was about halfway through grad school, I had an intuitive sense of just how far away that really was. And that's when I decided to pivot again.
Pivot back to technology?
Yeah. So during that time, there were a couple of startup side projects that I had casually worked on with some friends in Chicago, but it is really hard to find co-founders in Chicago, in part because the talent bench isn't as deep, and the culture of Chicago is a lot more risk averse. That there is a sort of assumption that what you do is you get your degree and then you work at an established company, and that's what success is.
Yeah.
Now, are there people who do start startups in Chicago? Yes. The proportion is much smaller. People aren't talking about it, and you won't randomly hear a conversation about it at a coffee shop.
Yeah, the way you definitely will in Palo Alto at Stanford.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. So you decided to make this pivot. What was kind of next after that? You have this degree now in your PhD, right?
Yeah, pardon?
Did you complete your PhD?
I did.
Okay.
Honestly, kind of out of spite. So my parents had split up during my undergrad. And when I started, right around the time I was starting my PhD, or right before I started my PhD, they decided to present a united front to me to pressure me to do an MD PhD instead, and do that instead of just a pure PhD. And I have zero interest in doing an MD.
Yeah.
And so I put my foot down and said, I am now in the driver's seat of my life, and you can't tell me what to do. And because I said that, I couldn't back down.
Yeah, you had to complete it.
I had to. Never underestimate spite as a motivator sometimes.
Definitely. There's always a chip on the shoulder. We'll talk about this later of like what makes a great founder, but there's always kind of something to prove or some level of maybe spite. Is a common
Well, I mean, I am honestly probably less risk tolerant than many startup founders are.
Okay.
Like there are friends of mine who decided to, during that 2010 era, move to the Bay Area with just their savings, and it would be people who lived in my hacker houses, right? And just decide to work on projects until something sticks. I didn't have that level of courage. Like that would just turn all of my hair gray. So I took a postdoc position. I started working at NASA. I worked on startup side projects on the side. During that time, none of them took off, but I was also systematically looking for potential co-founders at the same time. And so that gave me a source of stability and identity during a time of transition.
Nice. So you mentioned kind of the hacker house. Tell me about that. Hacker houses are now a pretty kind of well-known thing, but 10 years ago that might not have been the case. So.
Oh yeah, they were definitely. So we were the ones who really brought that into the mainstream attention.
Okay.
So I started my first hacker house a couple blocks from YC, right before YC interviews. And we rented a 4-bedroom-ish house. We put some bunk beds in it, and some of them were private rooms. And we rented the spaces out on Airbnb with the idea that, I mean, my motivation for starting it was to to grow my pipeline of potential co-founders.
Yeah.
And luckily enough, we had 4 teams interview for YC, and all 4 teams got in.
Nice.
And then some of them came back with the whole team to go to live with us while going through YC. And during that time, one of the teams had a founder breakup, which during that time, back when the average YC startup was very early stage, like your typical YC startup today is quite a bit more mature in terms of their product maturity. But back then it was, people pivot a lot. Co-founder breakups are by far the most common way for startups to die.
Yeah.
And so that's how I picked up my first co-founder. So at that time, most of my programming experience was research MATLAB and coursework C++. And also like QBasic from when my dad taught me,
yeah.
right? So like no JavaScript, no Ruby. Like Ruby on Rails was having its moment at that time. And so then my co-founder at that time taught me Ruby on Rails. And we worked on several projects that didn't take off. But around that time was when Meteor launched.
Tell listeners that don't know what Meteor is. What is Meteor?
It's a web framework built on top of Node.js that makes it super easy to build real-time applications. And the way it does that is so that you have server-side Mongo and you have a mini Mongo that lives in the client of your web application.
So you have 2 databases.
Yeah, so you have
the
a
big one on the server side, and then
you have a little one
that lives in the application
in the browser,
itself.
right?
Okay.
So when you do things, when you interact with the UI, it optimistically does exactly what you want to locally, and then it resolves like that split second later. So you don't feel the latency while you're using the app.
Mm-hmm.
So Meteor was so I ended up joining Meteor and was there for 2 years. It still exists as an open source project. The company today is the one behind Apollo GraphQL, and it was also in the first class of companies at HeavyBit. That was so it went through. Actually, the first YC demo day that I was at was when Meteor launched, and then I was in the first class of HeavyBit when Meteor was going through that program.
Diving in a little bit back to the Hacker House, 4 out of 4 acceptance instances to YC is pretty good.
Yeah.
What was the application process like for the Hacker House? Like, how did you select the right people to be there in the room?
Honestly, it was just like, who do I think would be a fun roommate to talk to?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right. And who do I think I have something to learn from? And that was kind of how we selected all of the housemates. And if somebody did something like we had rules that other hacker houses thought were a little bit draconian, like 0 dishes in the sink.
Okay.
And if the dishwasher is even 80% full, you run it.
Uh-huh.
And if someone was a bad roommate in that respect, then they don't get renewed for the next month.
Yeah.
And that made for people who were general, like when you select that way, and also if they wanted to watch a Star Trek marathon, right? If they had nerdy hobbies like us, then we were going to get along great.
Mm-hmm. Nice. Yeah, it's kind of selecting for a level of maturity or personal responsibility.
Yeah, there is sort of like, if you have people who are cooperate in a prisoner's dilemma,
yeah.
If their default is cooperate versus if their default is defect,
yeah.
right? It's that personality type, and also nerds who end up living with us often have this cultural thing where whether they were from, Sweden or Australia or wherever else they were, or like Latvia, they would say like, I had never found a group of people I really felt like were birds of my feather. Mm-hmm. I was always a little bit the odd one out, but now we are here and I can talk about the most esoteric topics, and all of my housemates are gonna be really into it. Right? Like I would talk about a math game that I used to play when I was a kid, and within moments, like everyone from startup founders to the Google interns and the Yelp interns who were living with us would decide that, all right, we're going to code a solver for this, and we're going to see who can do it first and whose is the most performant. And honestly, at the end of the day, it wasn't actually related to the skill of the person implementing it as it was about the tool set and the language that you choose. And the C++ people are just going to win it every time.
They're going to win that,
Yeah.
Awesome. So yeah, it sounds like kind of just a vibe check for people that you want to spend time with. And
yeah.
I guess people that you want to spend time with end up making great founders as well,
yeah.
Which probably has helped a lot in the angel investing.
Well, it's your intuition is basically a billion parameter model that's been finely tuned over a lifetime of experiences.
Yeah.
And so what you really want to do is make a habit of listening to your intuition.
Yeah. Diving into that a little bit, I personally feel that there are times when I can feel my gut telling me something, and so I lean into that and follow that. And then other times where it's only retrospectively, I'm like, oh, actually my gut was telling me the opposite of what I did. Mm-hmm. Like, what have you learned of how to kind of trust your intuition, or even know when your intuition is telling you something?
Yeah, I think it is very common for people to override their intuition by reasoning through things. And, this YouTuber named Dr. K, like Healthy Gamer GG? He's like, okay, there's something he said about meditation that really made a lot of sense to me. So a lot of people from my culture, and also first generation immigrants in general, our parents have a tendency to tell us these are the moves you need to make in life. Mm-hmm. Right? And it is a struggle to try to get into the driver's seat of your life. But once you make that transition, once you're in the driver's seat of your life, you never let that go, right? But it is also really hard to hear a voice that sounds like yourself because you've been hearing their voice in your head.
Yeah.
This is the thing that you're supposed to do. And one of the really useful things about meditation, it doesn't have to be sitting, in a lotus pose in a quiet room. It can be going for a hike with no music, no headphones, just walk. And the thing is, you don't tell yourself to not think. Think of your thoughts as being this cassette tape. Are you too young to remember what cassette tapes are? Okay.
Tapes,
You know what cassette tapes are.
I have a couple years of experience with those, yeah.
So what you want to do is run your thoughts like a cassette tape until you get to the end of the tape and find where the blank space is. And then you sit with the discomfort of the blank cassette tape. Mm-hmm. And you listen to that silence until it's like you're in a dark room, right? And your eyes adjust to a dark room, mm-hmm. and then you can see all the details again. And so when you get to the end of the cassette tape and you get all that silence, you accustom yourself to the silence. And then what comes after that is your own voice talking to yourself. And that's where your intuition is. Like sometimes it's hard to listen to your intuition because everything else is too loud.
Yeah, there's too much noise elsewhere. Yeah. That's a really good example. I've heard like the cloud example, like thoughts are kind of clouds and you wait till you have like a clear sky or the end of the cassette. Yeah, and then whatever arises is the next thing. Cool.
But yeah, I find that to be long hikes in nature tend to be a really good way to get to what your inner voice and what your intuition is telling you.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of long hikes in nature. I grew up going in the mountains in Utah, doing tons of hikes. The Pacific Northwest might be my favorite place on earth because it's just so green and you can just...
Is it just like Stardew Valley?
Sorry?
Is it just like Stardew Valley?
Honestly, a little bit greener and more foresty, to be honest.
Okay.
But there's flowers everywhere.
I hear salmon berries are real.
Salmon berries?
Yeah.
I can't tell you anything about that. I haven't played a lot of Stardew Valley. But,
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Well, cool. So you were running these hacker houses. You met a person that was kind of a fit as a co-founder.
Right. And I met a lot of, and there were a lot of startup founders. Over the years that we were in operation, 400 founders had come through our doors.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
How long were you doing these hacker houses?
Like several years and like across, we were at our peak 4 houses simultaneously, but about 5 houses overall.
Oh, so this was like a business that you
So it was
scaled
meant to
up.
be sustainable, but it wasn't meant to be profit maximizing.
Sure. Yeah.
Right. So like we provided food and we sponsored a lot of events in the house. But like if we were profit maximizing, like the MBA people who were looking for technical co-founders were willing to pay double rent.
Yeah.
Right. But they were not as fun to hang out with.
Yeah.
And they're like the vibe is completely different.
Yeah. They're not going to sit down and watch a Star Trek marathon with you.
No.
Okay, so you're running these hacker houses. You serve a ton of really interesting founders. Like, what's
We were the
kinda-
official housing partner of the Teal Fellowship during the time we were in operation
very
as well.
cool. So when they wanted to come out to SF, you were kind of the first place that they would send people?
Yeah. So like previous to that, there were a couple of independently operated roommate situations, but because of the way that because of the way that we had a house captain manage the inventory and order food and schedule cleaners, you don't have situations where you have 4 gallons of milk simultaneously going bad at the same time.
Yeah. I've been to some pretty nasty hacker houses with dishes in the sink and, yeah, all over the place.
But yeah, we had one house captain per house, and the house captain is basically a benevolent dictator who can decide who isn't welcome back, and is responsible for making sure that the vibe is right.
Nice. It sounds almost like cooperative housing, but almost more. There's that benevolent dictator that can actually keep everyone in line. Because I know with cooperative housing, because it's all collectively organized and run, sometimes things can just go off the rails.
Yeah, consensus building is pretty hard.
Yeah.
Group decision making is its own separate problem domain, right? And I mean, I selected my house captains based on nerdiness.
Seems like a pretty good filter, to be honest.
Yeah.
So what did that kind of lead to?
So my experiences scaling out the Hacker House network and also going mainstream. So there was a New York Times tech reporter who ended up living in one of the hacker houses while doing a different story, and then did a story on the house. And that's kind of how hacker houses as a concept went into mainstream culture.
Very cool. I got to follow up with you to get that link. I'll put it in the show notes or whatever, but that's fascinating.
Yeah, he was living there at the same time as the Massdrop founders, which were a group purchasing kind of e-commerce site. And they made their first engineering hire out of the house because a Yelp intern who happened to be in the house, in the living room at the same time, helped them fix an esoteric bug that they were running into.
Nice.
And they're like, okay, when you're done with your internship, here's a job offer.
Yeah. Very cool. So.
Oh, and because of the hacker houses, I ended up at a meetup for people who start intentional communities.
Cool.
And Jeff, who started Meteor and a Polygraph QL, was there because of his work on Monument, which was a different co-housing project. Where techies and artists, he actually like renovated a whole warehouse to be a viable living space that is up to code for people to officially live in.
Yeah.
And that was this like huge labor of love that took many years, and so we connected over our community building, and. At the end of this meetup, I thanked him for the existence of Meteor, and he was just shocked to see a user in the wild.
Yeah.
Because Meteor hadn't been around for that long yet, and that was how he ended up recruiting me.
Okay.
And so I was employee number 8 there.
Nice. So you joined Meteor. What was the work like? What were you doing?
So back then, the term DevRel didn't exist yet.
Yeah.
So it was, developer community and culture. So basically, I was growing the open source community of this project.
Nice. So like demoing at meetups, showing engineers the capabilities. What did
Some of
DevRel
that,
look like back then?
honestly, when you have a small number of employees and a much larger community, you have to do things that that scale beyond individual human effort.
Mm-hmm.
And so what you do is you make it easy for people in your community to do demos of their own project. And you learn from the people who came before you to basically make something people want.
Yeah.
Right. So the first meetup we did, so it was a combination of a content program and a meetup program, and also it had a lot in common with grassroots political movements.
Okay.
In general. So what you're really doing is you are looking at what people are trying to accomplish in their own careers and lives, and looking at ways for your incentives to align.
Mm-hmm.
And so if they are a student who is looking for things that are helping their experiences, if they're someone who is a job seeker, if they are someone who is writing a textbook, right? Like they all have different interests, and you can do things to help them in their own goals.
Yeah.
Right? Like if they are a shop that makes apps for clients, right? That's somebody you can really help. And so, the first meetup, we actually copied GitHub's model and did a drink up, and just to see what would happen and what I noticed.
Sorry, you said a drink up?
Yeah, so GitHub was doing these meetups where you just, hey, a bunch of us are hanging out at a bar and come meet us and we'll talk about stuff, right? And so we kind of used a similar format just to see what would happen and see how many people would show up if we did one. And what ended up happening was people would be taking their laptops out of their backpack and trying to show each other what they were building.
Yeah.
Which, in retrospect, like, of course, this is okay. Let's make something people want. So let's give them the meetup format that they actually want.
Mm-hmm.
So next one was when it was soon after we moved into the large Meteor office, and so we had a lightning talk series where this was back before Hackpad was acquired by Dropbox. So it's kind of like Google Docs. And like anyone can drop in their name and the name of their 3-minute presentation to demo the app that they built.
Cool.
And so it was, and so there was a socializing component, and you have a place where you can put your laptop and show everybody what you built instead of showing it like 10 times to different people at tables.
Yeah.
And that ended up being the format. And we also had a daytime session where people who were working on apps could come in and just, sit at a table and maybe get some help if they wanted to.
Like office hours almost.
Yeah. That format was largely inspired by Super Happy Dev House. Are you familiar with Super Happy Dev House?
No.
Okay, so, gosh.
Educate me. I love this. It's like lore.
Okay, Bay Area culture, right.
Bay Area lore.
So every 6 weeks, so David Weekley, who with a bunch of friends also started Hacker Dojo, started this recurring hackathon called Super Happy Dev House. It was every 6 weeks, and it was usually at somebody's home, and you could go and work on whatever project you wanted for basically a Saturday, and then people would demo their projects in the evening time during like when food was being served, and then what happened was it just kept growing in size until it wouldn't fit in somebody's house or backyard anymore. And so there would need to be a sponsor every time.
Yeah.
So, like Microsoft would host it, and then Google would host it. And the scale of putting it on, like 1,000 people would show up, or 1,500 people would show up. And so it's basically organizing a conference every 6 weeks. Like the load on the organizers was just too immense. And so it grew to become like, there would, you would skip one because everybody got busy, and I mean, the scale at which it happened, it kind of, it, it at the same time that it was reaching this sort of scale issue, there was also super happy dev houses that started happening in other cities like Mexico City, and I wonder if there might have been one in Austin at some point. But basically, when you attract a group of hackers together and just work on whatever project you want on a regular basis, interesting stuff happens.
For sure.
And then actually, Hacker Dojo was born out of that.
Nice. So you took a page out of that playbook.
Yes. So the format was
nice.
Come to the Meteor office, work on whatever you want during the day. We'll provide a space for it, and you'll get food and snacks. And then in the evening is when the program really begins. And so one of the main differences is it wasn't just what it evolved into was not just lightning talks, but one of the core devs would usually make a main presentation, a feature presentation that was about 10 to 15 minutes long, that would usually talk about the features in the new release, and people would be asking about stuff that's on the roadmap. And so it was this really this high bandwidth exchange with the community. And what ended up happening is we would do things like we would do the release during the presentation.
Oh, cool.
And we would live stream it on YouTube. And people would tweet questions that I would then read out loud. And people tweeting questions made it really easy to choose the good questions.
Yeah, definitely.
And that were substantive, that had good answers. And so me being the host of that, we would then have this discussion that would then, whatever was in the new features. And then people would also tweet questions to the people who gave lightning talks and who were demoing their apps.
Yeah, it's a great way to collect customer feedback kind of in real time and make it into an event as opposed to just submitting feedback through a form on the website or something like that.
Yeah.
Cool. So you're at Meteor.
About 2 years.
About 2 years, okay.
During that time, my husband, who then boyfriend, but he was at Google. He wanted to leave and start a startup, but he also had this open source project that he had been planning to work on.
Mm-hmm.
So are you familiar with protocol buffers?
Protocol buffers.
Yeah. So he open sourced that while he authored Proto V2 and open sourced it while he was at Google.
So one of the goals with this podcast is to kind of pull the curtain down on some of these very technical topics in a way that's more accessible. So I've heard of protocol buffers, but I would love to have you kind of explain it to me as a novice.
So it's the way that Google servers talk to each other. It's a format.
Mm-hmm. Format of sending data between two different systems.
Yeah. And when he wrote it to be more performant than the original, he had to make it backwards compatible with Proto V1 because Google has petabytes of data in that format. But if you're starting a project from scratch, there's no reason why some other company or startup or any other project has to be backwards compatible with Google's data. Mm-hmm. And so he started Cap'n Proto, which is today used by Cloudflare very extensively, and lots of people who don't tell us that they're using it.
So what is that kind of technology? What does that enable in terms of capabilities?
So it's a zero copy format. So there's no interpretation step. The messaging, the serialization. It's a serialization protocol where the message on the wire is also the same as what it is in memory. So if you go to captainproto.org, there's lots of stuff. And Kenton could do a much better job answering questions about Cap'n Proto than I can. But he worked on that for a year while I was at Meteor. And with the idea that a year later he was going to start a startup. And there was a buddy of his who was also an engineer at Google, and they had worked together pretty closely, who was his original co-founder. And what happened was, that was the plan for Sandstorm, before it even had a name. So they planned to start. His friend was going to leave Google and be his co-founder, and they applied for YC and didn't get in. And then his friend decided to not leave Google. And I was pissed. I was I was not about to let him give up.
Yeah. Because you saw the potential.
Yeah, and also like, I mean, call it sunk cost fallacy or whatnot, but like, I'm already invested with a year of my life, right?
Yeah.
And like, I'm holding down a job. You are not going to give up. I'm going to quit my job and we're going to go do this. Before we do this, we're gonna. I'm still a little bit risk averse relative to most startup founders. So let's do a little bit of market validation. Maybe let's run a crowdfunding campaign. I don't have a good intuition yet about who your end users are. So let's have real conversations with them as a result of a crowdfunding campaign and see what's going to happen. So I went all in. I quit my job too.
Burn the boats.
Yeah.
Yeah. And joined Sandstorm as a co-founder.
Yeah.
Doing things that probably should have been done from the beginning in terms of market validation, talking to customers.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing, right? Like, and this is something that I learned the hard way. There was and still is a lot of groupthink among engineers and scientists, and this is something that a common pitfall that a lot of startup founders fall into. It is very, very easy for engineers and scientists to dramatically underestimate the depth of knowledge and depth of expertise that product managers, salespeople, marketing people, customer success people, and like an MBA people have, right? While on the balance, it is much easier to teach an engineer or a scientist those skills than the other way around.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that you will learn those skills before you run out of runway. And that's something that a lot of startup founders don't necessarily realize, right? So if you have somebody like the best thing you can do is hire for your blind spots. And the skills that you yourself don't possess. The second best thing you can do is get a mentor who knows what your blind spots are and who can, in a pinch, like help you have a conversation with somebody, help you give the short version help you give this like short version. Think of like, here's what your sales materials maybe ought to be. Here's how you think about the enterprise sales cycle. Like we didn't know what we didn't know about enterprise sales when we went into it, and that was like a huge blind spot for us.
So maybe just to set the stage, so you joined Sandstorm as a co-founder. Like, what was the actual business? What problem were you solving? Who were eventually those customers you started working with?
The core problem we were solving was running relatively less trusted code in a secure environment. So if you wanted to, so we were a self-hosting platform where you could take any open source product, or it doesn't have to be open source, but some app, and host it on your own personal server or your private cloud server. And we had a model that was very fine-grained, which meant that every document was a separate container.
Okay.
And so the containerization engine itself, using Linux kernel namespacing, was what actually provided the security so that the people you share that document with or that application with are the people who have access to it. Now, I think one main oversight was perhaps that we were a little bit early. GDPR had just happened while we had a pivot, and there were a couple of other missteps along the way.
As there always is.
Yeah, like we pivoted from being a consumer-facing product to an enterprise product after having raised on a consumer-facing plan. And we didn't know what we didn't know about enterprise sales. And by the time we understood that, we had less runway than we had than the length of a typical enterprise sales cycle.
Yeah.
So that's something that that was a huge blind spot.
So what did you do? Did you kind of raise bridge funding?
We attempted to raise bridge funding, but we also, so at a critical juncture, we decided there were two possible paths, right? We were going to look for potential acquisitions or raise bridge funding.
Mm-hmm.
And we decided to try and get as much information as we could on both paths and then make a decision. So, so my job was to look for bridge funding, and Kenton's job was going to, but we would help each other both on this. And so we perhaps ran the company a little bit more democratically than most startups do. And so anyone in the company could, we had this shared document. Anyone could nominate a company that we could end up at, and anyone can veto anyone else's choice. And so we ended up with fewer than 10 on that list, because there were some that were, people were just like, no, I will definitely, that's a hard no, I will not work there, right? And so that narrowed it down to a list of where we would have our conversations, and I cold emailed Michelle Zatlin, and I told her that I appreciated the talk that she gave at Female Founders Conference, and also mentioned that Cloudflare was a huge user of Cap'n Proto, which is an open source project that we maintain. In fact, we only knew that that Cloudflare was using Cap'n Proto as extensively as they were because they had blogged about it.
Oh, wow. Uh-huh.
And like Cloudflare engineers would like recognize Kenton wearing a Cap'n Proto shirt, and like ask him to take selfies with them when we got off the Caltrain. And so like, okay, and you guys are a huge user of an open source product that we maintain, and we're looking to get acquired. Can we talk? And so that's kind of what, and she immediately forwarded to the CTO and special projects and the teams that handle this sort of thing.
Yeah.
And so and Cloudflare was by far the, like among the companies we were talking to, got the ball rolling the most efficiently. Like this was in December. So people were starting, it was like in early December, so like people were starting to go on vacation. Like it was hard to get people scheduled at the right time, but yeah, like Cloudflare was like, all right, we're just gonna have people call in where necessary, and we're just gonna like make these conversations happen before the new year.
Nice. So it moved quickly then.
Yeah, yeah.
And by
so
the new year.
We were onboarded by March.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So got acquired by Cloudflare, joined Cloudflare, and you had a bunch of different roles there at Cloudflare. Like, I guess really quickly, kind of tell me a little bit about them.
Yeah, so originally so when our team joined, so Kenton started the Workers project, which became the Cloudflare developer platform. And I was slotted into the marketing team to basically make sure that to start the developer relations program.
Yeah.
And so, you know, we, like my first month included organizing a conference presence, a last minute organizing at JSConf EU. And it also coincided with the last month of our CMO. So there was a little bit of flux because there was a changing of the guard. And there is a saying in DevRel that I kind of appreciate, that a lot of times companies don't know where DevRel belongs.
Yeah.
Because you have one kind of set of KPIs when you're in marketing, and a different kind of KPI if you're in product, and it tends to roll around the organization like a loose marble.
Yeah.
And it really depends, and so a lot of people ask me about like what you should be thinking about when you start a DevRel program, and the thing that you really should be thinking about is like, what are your organizational goals?
Yeah.
Right. around DevRel, because what that program looks like is going to depend heavily on what your goals for that program are, and that determines where they sit.
So are some of the common kind of goals, like one obviously to drive usage of the platform, another could be
Increasing, improving the developer experience, improving documentation,
product feedback,
feed
yeah.
loop, showcasing what people have built. There is something particularly challenging if you have a lot of developer surface area across a large number of products. That makes it really hard to build a developer relations program effectively. But if you are serving one product, then your goals are very clear. So you're not being pulled in a lot of directions. So there was a DevRel program, and right around 2020, January of 2020, like December, January, like we did our plan. We moved to Austin.
For Cloudflare?
Yes. So the reason was most of the developer platform team was being hired in Austin. And we were doing a lot of coordination over Zoom all the time. And so, leadership said, this is kind of inefficient. There's only a small handful of you in San Francisco. Why don't we put the whole team together in Austin so you don't have to coordinate over Zoom all the time? So that decision was made in 2019. We moved to Austin, and then a couple months later, we moved in January, and then back to Zoom.
2 months later, yeah, COVID hits.
Back to Zoom,
you're
yeah.
Back to Zoom. Yeah.
But all things considered, I'm very glad we moved to Austin. Austin is, there is something about Austin that is fundamentally very different. And today, there are more engineers in the Cloudflare office in Austin than in San Francisco.
Yeah.
And it is the culture of the Austin office. Perhaps it's at the time that we moved. I would say there were some certain differences with San Francisco, in part because the percentage of the office that was engineers was just much higher.
Yeah.
Compared to the San Francisco office, which had people from every department, which is not a bad thing, right?
Yeah.
But salespeople are going to be making phone calls, and engineers are going to want to have discussions about certain kinds of things. So when you're in an engineering majority kind of office, that does influence the kind of culture and the way that people interact with each other, and the kind of water cooler conversations you might have.
And the types of get-togethers you might have as a team.
Yeah.
Yeah. So people ask me about kind of tech companies coming to Austin, and Cloudflare is always the immediate one to point out because it's a relatively younger company, right? Went public 5 or 6 years ago.
Right around when I was on maternity leave. So that would have been early 2019, I think?
Yeah.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, so younger company, but
Yeah.
obviously very large presence here in Austin, lots of engineers.
Yeah.
They bring in pretty incredible interns every summer that I sometimes have the privilege of connecting with and talking to. So it's just really exciting to have them here. And also great timing for you, right? Obviously relocating for the purpose of being in person and then having to go to Zoom isn't ideal, but here in Texas, we were able to go to restaurants and stuff outside after 5-6 months.
Yeah, except personally, and it's part of just how my brain wiring is. I was in paranoid mode.
Oh, fair. Yeah.
We had baby and grandmother at home.
Oh yeah, okay.
So we were in much more paranoid mode than everybody else.
Yeah. So you came out to Austin.
We bought a piece of land. We built a house on it.
Nice.
But a lot of that time was design and permitting. And then a year and a half ago, we finally moved into our forever home.
Awesome.
So.
And it's kind of like a local legend because you have a really cool gaming setup. It was on Linus Tech Tips. Right?
Yeah,
We did kind of a feature of the gaming setup. You host dinners there. I guess tell me, now that you've been in Austin for 5 years, like, what continues to keep you excited about the city and kind of have your forever home here?
Yeah. So I would say Austin is really interesting in that tech sits at the intersection of a large number of other industries, right? Whether that is energy and oil and gas, or agriculture, or biomedical devices, or hardware, which is like also tech, but also like there are people who design GPUs who like live here,
Yeah.
right? And so when you have this intersection of different industries, the kinds of things that it's much easier to talk to somebody outside of your information bubble, right?
Outside of that groupthink you were talking about,
Right,
that
right. Like,
sometimes engineers can
if
fall
you're in
into.
San Francisco, you're going to be talking to other engineers who build tech for tech, and that's very natural, right? Like that's just a function of the demographics that live there. And in the like 2010 to 2017 era, like there was a period of time before 2008 when like nobody invested in dev tools, and so like building engineers building tools for engineers, like that is like very, very critical to the ecosystem as a whole.
Yeah, certainly.
Right. And like New York, if you're like is at the intersection of the industries that are in New York. If you're building for finance, if you're like if you're it's very natural to have the conversations where you're at those crossroads. And if you're in the gaming industry, right? If you could very easily talk to game designers and graphic artists who are living in LA, right? And that is their own ecosystem, and that's the industry that is there. Austin is very unique in that it is a combination of like, I would never have met somebody who built a high-tech chicken coop in the Bay Area, right? Like
AI-powered chicken coop.
yes,
Yeah.
yes. Like the people I've met who here at Antler who used to do clinical trials, right, as part of their career, and now are building tooling that makes that much more efficient, right? Like I am personally much more likely to invest in a company where a couple of scientists hired some engineers as their founding team to solve a problem that they themselves have because they walked a mile in the shoes of their customers, right? And that's very different from two hoodies and a suit, who identified a market opportunity and then found somebody who is a subject matter expert to validate the market, and then went and hired possibly an unrelated product manager to execute on that vision. Like if all else being equal, like those two teams, I'm gonna go for the team that has walked a mile in the shoes.
Yeah, definitely. So maybe this is a good way to pivot into kind of your angel investing. You've been a pretty prolific angel investor. Like how many companies would you say you've invested in?
About 35, 36 since 2010, yeah.
Individually since 2010?
Yeah.
What have been some of the major learnings from that experience throughout that time? And I guess particularly interested in different dynamics or trends that change the way you have to think about building companies or investing.
Yeah, I would say a lot of things have changed since the early days of when I had. So I was first money in a Matterport. I've also LP'd in a couple of micro funds.
Okay.
Which, like, before AngelList made that easy to do, was like a kind of a Herculean task for the folks who did that. At the end of the day, like you have to betting on raw intellectual horsepower is better than betting on market opportunity, the vast majority of the time. Because sometimes markets change, and also you discover new information as you like no plan no plan survives first contact,
Yeah.
right? It's what your backup plan is. It's how you pivot in real time. It's how you respond to new information. And can you trust that this person is going to make well-reasoned decisions once they are presented with new information? Right? Like, and as a first approximation, raw intellectual horsepower is a pretty good one. But also, when I was much younger, I valued raw intellectual horsepower much more than I valued general competence, which is really hard to quantify with a test.
Yeah.
Right? But it comes out in little things. It comes out in little things like, does this person load the dishwasher correctly?
Yeah.
Right? Like it comes out in things like, can you change a flat tire? Right?
Yeah.
And if not, is there someone on your team who has who covers your blind spots?
Yeah.
Because there are like a lot of, like I grew up in a community of first generation immigrants who like the percentage of us who became entrepreneurs is very high. The percentage of us who have a large amount of raw intellectual horsepower is also very high. But this sort of less tangible competence is not evenly distributed, right? And the same people don't necessarily have both. And then the other ingredient, ambition.
Yeah.
Right? Like there are people in my life who have high levels of ambition and competence, and I don't want them to feel like they are being called out here, but who have a high level of competence and intelligence, but not necessarily ambition. And that is okay, right? Like that person is a fantastic early employee.
Yeah.
But like ambition and risk tolerance really go hand in hand. And some people are definitely going to make better early employees than they will make founders. And that is critical for humanity to have a wide range and a distribution of wiring that people can be born with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but only certain types of wiring really lend themselves to the journey of building successful,
I think
fast-growing startup.
I think there are a lot of people. I think we are living in a time where I think the equilibrium team size of larger tech companies is going to shrink a lot.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to see way fewer 10,000 people companies in the future. You're going to see a lot of companies ship incredible products with 3-4 employees, hit their stride before they hit 20 employees, and maybe max out before they hit 1,000 employees, like probably fewer than 100. Which means the number of entrepreneurs in this ecosystem needs to be much, much higher. And there's something that's kind of interesting at play, which is that there is a lot of value to be created in the application layer of AI, right? Like, I think the people who are working on frontier models are doing a fantastic job doing their job. And this is, partly it's driven by the kinds of conversations that I have when I'm in Austin. But the application layer where there is entrepreneurial talent where somebody who used to work in the energy sector, somebody who used to work in agriculture, somebody who used to work in clinical research, right? Like those people who have ambition, competence, raw intelligence, and enough risk tolerance to say, I'm gonna take a year for my break and I have the confidence that that's okay, right? I can still find a job in my field if this doesn't work out. And I'm going to solve a problem that has been really bothering me, that has been a thorn in my side. And we have never been in a better time because large amounts of engineering talent is readily available. Right, there is engineering talent that is laying fallow right now. Like what we as a like, I mean, we're on the investor side. Like, it is critically important to be investing in application layer type startups, and I think there is actually like a pretty big mismatch between what needs to be funded and what currently is getting successfully funded. And that is like a whole separate thread to pull down on its own.
Well, I think it's interesting because if you think about investing below the application layer into infrastructure,
which is worth doing as well.
For
right?
sure.
Yeah.
But those are in many ways more prone to changes in the underlying technology than the application layer. Where the application layer is based on this type of customer has this problem, and you solve it for them with technology. You can change the way you use technology to solve that problem, but that problem is still probably going to exist. Whereas if you're building a certain type of infrastructure, and then we completely rethink the way that we run this infrastructure, there's nowhere for that company to go.
I mean, it's like you built your Factorio map and you built it in a way like, oh crap, I have to rip everything up and build it again.
Do you like cozy games?
I do.
Like Factorio, Stardew Valley?
So I would say Factorio is not a cozy game.
Okay.
It is a factory optimization game,
Okay.
which is a genre that I am deeply addicted to.
Did you play a lot of Roller Coaster Tycoon?
No.
Okay.
But like
In many
Factorio
ways,
Satisfactory, and this new game that I just started playing the demo of, which is like a cross between Stardew Valley and Factorio, called My Rocket Lab, My Little Rocket Lab.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Can I get it on Steam, like early access or something?
Yeah. And there is just something where, and this is also just part of how I'm wired. If I have and you know, in working and investing and also going to events and having conversations, sometimes even when I'm talking to nerds, I've had way too much human interaction, and I just need to go to my happy place and optimize some conveyor belts.
Yeah, I totally get that. Like, one thing I've learned about myself is that I also obviously have lots of social interactions, but when I just am totally spent, I need to just lock myself in a dark room and just play a game, you know, like one of the games that I'm excited about or whatever. And that really recharges me.
Yeah, like there's parts of my brain that do a lot of the talking and the language centers, and those need a break. So I work the other parts that are, you know, I just need to go build something.
Yeah, nice. Well, I guess pivoting it back to kind of investing and trends that you're seeing, we covered a couple of them, but what new opportunities exist today's world that maybe didn't exist 5 years ago, pre-popularity of transformer models, LLMs, et cetera?
Yeah, I mean, I would say the types of things that can be built today with a much smaller team are much more numerous. And there are things that were kind of uneconomical to build before. And there's use cases that are deep in the reaches of other industries that might not necessarily be your typical early adopter. Right? And those are the folks who, when talent leaves one of those industries to start a company, that really makes me pay attention. And there was an interesting paper I saw this fun graph in the other day. Actually, you could break it down into a 2x2 matrix.
Okay.
Of what AI is highly accurate at, and what AI it does a not as great a job at, or it kind of has mediocre accuracy at, and then the desirability of that from the perspective of the end user.
Okay.
Right, and things that humans find highly desirable to do as a job versus the kinds of jobs that really suck. Right. And if you see what is actively being invested in, there are real gaps between within highly desirable and highly accurate with AI, and low desirability and low accuracy from AI are getting a lot of investment.
Okay.
But like where you really ought to be concentrating is high desirability of humans to get rid of that job, right? Whether
So
it's
low desirability of the job itself, but
yes,
high accuracy from
yes,
AI. Uh-huh.
yes, and what's changing in real time is like where AI is getting accurate,
Yeah.
right? So like that part of the shaded part of that scatter plot is like moving all the time, but the human desire to do that kind of job does not
It's
change.
static,
That
yeah.
axis has not changed.
Interesting. So that's where a lot of the opportunities lie. Because
Yeah.
theoretically, the AI is not going to go, it's not going to get less competent at certain tasks.
Yeah.
It's probably going to continue progressing.
Right, but there is also a gap, right? Like especially when investors hear a lot of founders pitch, there is this group think that like, okay, it must be really like 98% accurate at this particular task, and then the person using it is like, dude, it's like 70% accurate, and I have to still spend like a couple of days like fixing this, right?
Yeah.
And it's me that has to do it, and it's like a person who is non-technical is not going to be able to tell where the 30% inaccuracies are.
Yeah.
Right. And there is this promise of like, well, next year it'll be better, so invest now, which is like not necessarily like irrational.
That's a fair argument.
But like, I think it makes sense to much more highly value the experience of the end user in these scenarios, right? Like sometimes, right now, we're starting to see something that happened before 2008, which is where the purchasing decision for developer tools and engineering tools was being made by a person who is like 5 to 8 layers of the org chart apart from the person using the tool. And this is where, a person investing in the product is many layers removed from a person who is using that product.
Yeah.
And the closer you are together, the closer those decision makers are together, the better the kind of decisions you're going to make. Right? Like if it's like an engineer and their manager is like, okay, if it's below this amount, just buy it, whatever, right? Like that is, and the engineer is making that decision. The engineer is making trade-offs around, okay, this is a kind of reasonable cost, and it's also making me much more efficient in this job, and it's very different from like, oh, my, several layers up said I have to use this tool, but it sucks, but it checks all of the boxes. Like those are very different kinds of decisions.
And right now, you think the pendulum is swinging back towards
I
the
think
end user and their judgment versus.
I think it's that shape in a different domain.
Okay.
So AI tools, right, are being invested in based on the judgments of people who are not super close to the end user.
Got it. Yeah.
Right. And part of that is like a lot of investors come from walks of life that are different, right? Like investing in dev tools really took off when the hoodies started holding the purse strings and making the investment decisions, right? Unless your investment team has high bandwidth access to somebody who is an end user of that product, who may or may not be handpicked by the person who is pitching you, right?
Yeah.
Like you got to talk to somebody who's
Customer
personally,
interviews.
yeah.
And ideally not the ones that they send you, because of course they're only.
Well,
gonna
I mean,
say
there's going to
great
be
things.
some cherry picking involved, right?
sure,
Like,
yeah.
but like if you can randomly talk to, like if you can talk to a random sample of somebody in your own network who has walked a mile in their shoes and actually sit them down in front of the product and have them use it and give you their feedback, that is a very different thing, right? Like, that is very different instead of saying like, hey, hey buddy, you work in this industry, I'm going to send you this link, tell me what you think, which is what the standard practice is, because that takes very little effort. And specifically in AI, you kind of get a different kind of groupthink, because there's a certain breed of Luddites in the industry, very understandable, who refuse to try something new and just know without trying that this thing is going to suck. And so you don't want to value an opinion of someone who hasn't actually, installed the tools and actually taken it for a spin.
Yeah, actually build something with it.
Yeah.
I definitely find that when I'm talking to founders of companies that are building things that I would use or have used, that gives me much better ability to trust my intuition or my gut.
Yeah.
Because I've actually used similar products in the past and I understand what works well, what doesn't, and kind of
Yeah, and also it helps clarify the differences in use cases.
Yeah.
For instance, I think a lot of investors have this idea of, oh yeah, there's going to be like one AI app builder to rule them all, and I don't think that's the case.
Yeah.
Right? Like different app builders are geared towards different personas, different
Absolutely.
types of end users, and when you actually use them, you start to realize, oh, like somebody needs to be deeply technical to use this. Somebody needs to be as technical as a typical PM to use this. Okay, for this one, you could have a conversation with this founder and they're like, okay, tell me about the end user that you have in your mental model. And they're like, it's my buddy who runs a sandwich shop, who wants an ordering system. Right, and wants to be able to like take orders through a mobile app or through a web browser and ship the sandwiches early. Like, that is a very different kind of end user from someone who is like, or from someone who has a mature enterprise offering, right? That is an app that's already out there, and they are looking to incorporate models into their app. Like the tools that do that are entirely different use cases.
Yeah.
Like it is not competitive to be investing in multiples of those.
Yeah. I find that, like maybe, I don't know if it's a red flag, but a mistake that I see with founders sometimes is they build, like let's use an app builder as an example. It's like, who is this for? And they don't get that niche and specific with, this is for my friend who runs a sandwich shop and the other million people just like him in the US. It's very much, well, we can use it for enterprise business intelligence, and then we could use it for hobbyists and app builders, and like they're very broad with the focus. And because of that, it becomes very difficult to underwrite if they're going to be able to sell this at a high velocity.
Yeah, I think part of that is conditioned as a response because of certain kinds of conversations that founders have with. So there's two drivers of this behavior.
Yeah.
Right. One is investors saying to founders, "I don't think the market is big enough."
Yeah, which is often just a polite way of saying we don't believe in this company.
Right.
Is what I've found.
Yeah. But it's from the founder's perspective, it is incredibly important to have a wedge market, like for different reasons than investors think, right? Because you have, like you as a founder, you have a finite runway after you raise. Every dollar or every hour that you spend on customer acquisition, you need to be doing this analysis of figuring out where are you getting the most retention. And if you can't figure that out, that's going to be, you're going to run to the end of your runway, right? Like it may very, like the reason you go for a wedge market is not because you turn down the other types of customers. It's because you notice that for a particular type of customer, like those people have the highest retention. And so those people, you should be spending more of your dollars and hours getting more of those people. And like it is a hard thing, right? Like and this is something that came out in a founder interview. So when I was running the Workers Launchpad program at Cloudflare, where we took founders through a 10-week course, and there's like anybody building on the Cloudflare developer platform. I would do some interviews with individual, like they're like fireside chats.
Yeah.
Like, let's make sure that none of these people have the same blind spots that I did. You can have new blind spots, just don't definitely be cognizant of the ones that I had, right? And one of the things that came up in when I interviewed Danny Grant from Jam who is a Cloudflare alumni who went on to start a company, is there's a really useful exercise you do with user retention. Let's say you have, you're just beyond your design partners and you have like 3 to 10 users. You need to define like what does it mean that they are a daily active or a monthly active user, right? Like, is it that they logged in and did something in your app? Is it like they took this kind of action? Like what is a meaningful amount of a meaningful action where they got value from your application? And you plot that month to month, and you look for where all the green lines are, because maybe they logged in this month and maybe they didn't log in next month, or maybe it's days, right? Like whatever the interval makes sense. And you look for where the green lines are and what do those people have in common. And this is like the reason why, the way that VCs usually ask, like, so what industry vertical are they in? Like, what's the company size that you're going after, right? Like, those are the common things that the green lines that you're looking at, they might be in the same industry. They might be in the same company size, or they might have something else in common that isn't necessarily obvious.
Yeah.
But you as a founder, like, you got to figure out what those things, like, so now you have a hypothesis. You have a hypothesis that if you find more customers who fit this profile, you are going to have a higher retention rate. So go out, and so now you validate that hypothesis. You go out and you get more people for whom that hypothesis is true. Now, is it the case that you retain a lot more of them? Maybe it's true. Maybe that's not what they had in common, right? And then it's time to formulate a new hypothesis. Like, you generally want to be crawling out and getting more customers, but you want to be actively thinking about where your retention is the strongest.
Yeah, 2 interesting thoughts that brings up. One, at Antler, when we talk about kind of like the first wedge, the way that we describe it is kind of this critical path of
Right.
like this customer or this type of person, because it could be industry, it could be size of company, it could be something totally non-obvious, has this kind of problem or pain point that you can address with this value prop.
Right.
And over time, if the company's successful, you're going to have tons and tons of different variations of those core 3 things. But you've got to find the critical path. You've got to find the one where the retention is the strongest, that gives you some sort of escape velocity, that then earns you the right to start servicing these other
Right. Like, you are in a
scenarios.
strong position if you are unkillable.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you can become unkillable by finding that critical path.
Yeah.
And it's just order of operations.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. This is like a real-time strategy game.
Yeah.
You got to get your build order right.
Exactly. Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's a really great way to think about it. Yeah. Like, I always like the example of HubSpot, right? HubSpot didn't start with this all-in-one sales and marketing platform for any size company. It started with marketing for SMBs. And then they built kind of repeatability and found some sort of product market fit retention with SMB marketing teams, and found that those same customers were like, hey, let me get my sales team on this platform. So they built that out next. That then dramatically increases their addressable market, because now you're not just selling to marketing, you're selling to sales. And so then they figured out how to create kind of retention within that separate market as well. And then they found, okay, now we've got all this great infrastructure, let's start selling it to enterprise.
Right.
And instead of having to start from scratch, they just had to build in role-based access, SOC 2, like some of the enterprise bells and whistles. And now they're able to take that existing business that is doing very well and growing fast and immediately double or triple their addressable market size by selling it to the enterprise. But if they had started with enterprise, there's no guarantee that it would have worked, right?
Yeah.
Because that customer type might not have had the same level of retention. Also, there's just way more infrastructure that they needed to build, as opposed to this critical path with SMB marketing that then leads to the rest of the business over time.
Exactly.
The second thing that what you were describing brought up is in a podcast that we recorded yesterday, Rakshak Talwar, he runs the Austin Deep Learning community. He was talking about first-time founders focus on product. Second-time founders often focus on distribution, right? So not just can I build the product, but how do I get it to users?
Right.
But third-time founders actually focus on retention. So I think that's a really cool through line and like indicative of what you were saying, which is it's all about finding the users where it's the stickiest.
Yeah.
And then you can kind of grow and build on that from there.
Yes, and in a large capacity, whatever your trauma was last time is the thing that keeps you up at night this time, right?
Yeah. So we could acquire customers last time, but they didn't stick around. So now we're going to focus on retention. Yeah.
But hopefully, right, like hopefully everyone listening to this is like, okay, maybe you don't have to experience that trauma firsthand.
Yeah. Learn from collective mistakes that others
Right,
have made.
and you know what? Like we all stand on the shoulders of giants, right? Like that is the human project.
Yeah.
Right? And like that is the nature of civilization. The fact that the infrastructure that has been built and the knowledge gained by all the generations that came before us and all the traumas that they went through is so that we don't have to go through the same pitfalls.
Yeah. Hopefully we can learn from our collective mistakes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Especially I think in this world where, like, just to touch on an early thread, building is easier than ever.
Oh,
It used
yeah.
to be that actually like building and scaling a product was very, very difficult. Not that it's easy now. It's still quite difficult, but
Well, the difficulties are in different places now,
Exactly.
right? Like when you, like, gosh, if it was like 2005 to 2008, like even before 2010, one or two members of your team are physically racking up servers,
Yeah.
right? Like when I was in RCC at Stanford, one of the, like, our official policy was like students aren't supposed to be using dorm bandwidth to start their companies. So like unofficially, can you like maybe please use your department's bandwidth? I mean, like today we have like every cloud service,
yeah,
right?
you can spin up a new virtual
Right.
server rack in 5 minutes.
And then like Startups started, and then there was like an official space for startups on campus to go, and that was fantastic from the perspective of departments and RCCs everywhere, right? But like, like I remember, gosh, what year? It was 2010, maybe 2011. Someone who had recently relocated, someone who lived in my hacker house. Was on a back-end team at Facebook when like that particular team completely got cut, and he had just relocated to the U.S. and was about to like he wouldn't have permission to stay in the U.S. unless he immediately found another job. And there was another startup who sometimes hangs out at our hacker houses, and who I knew because there was a NASA intern who had been classmates with him. And they lost a back-end engineer because that guy just like, long story,
Okay.
right? They lost a back-end engineer on short notice. Things were kind of on fire, and just like that match was like same day. And like, that kind of hair on fire situation would not be the case today.
Yeah. Because there's
because of cloud services.
yeah, infrastructure built.
And like, and as a startup, like every single one of these cloud providers gives you free stuff, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And from the perspective of the cloud providers, of course the next generation of startups should be building on their infrastructure. And it doesn't make sense for a company to die if they accidentally lose a back-end engineer.
Yeah.
Right.
I was talking to Rick about this yesterday, where like Uber was coming up on its storage capacity, and they couldn't just spin up another server rack. They had to figure out a way to clear out enough capacity so it could keep writing new rows to the database. And it's just the kind of problem that like doesn't really exist anymore because
unless you're running the infrastructure companies, right? Like
Yeah,
you're still like in a situation where we need to spin up more data centers. We need to do like there are people whose job it is to do that, but they can do that in an aggregate kind of way,
Yeah.
where it's not one particular company is running out of space. It's like you can look at trends across the entire industry and know when you need to provision entire data centers.
Yeah. So one question I would be curious your take on. I really resonate with what you said earlier about because companies are not scaling in the same way that they used to, and they'll kind of tap out around 1,000, then we're going to need more startups.
Yeah, we
And
definitely need more startups.
So I guess the question that I'm kind of thinking through is, does that mean that venture capital needs to fund more startups?
Yes.
Or does that model even work, right? Because can you have that many companies that do as well as the venture capital math need them to do to return the fund and then some, right? If it's built in these kind of like smaller, faster, more modular way.
I think there is no limit to the number of problems to solve that make human lives better.
Okay.
And that doesn't correlate with team size necessarily, right? The fact that you can solve a problem with a lower team size is not a bad thing. Now, will that company ever need to go public? Meh, I don't know.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, that's kind
but
of
like
what I'm
those things need to exist. So,
Yeah.
I mean, also there was that period of time when the reporting, where the laws around the requirements for going public had changed, and then so companies started going public later and later in their lifetime, and now you have secondary markets that operate kind of like a public market, but not really.
Yeah.
Market's gonna market, man.
Yeah. That's fair. I mean, like one of the compelling visions for the future that I could see is like a world where, because it is so easy or so much easier to solve problems with technology, you have people solving problems that aren't necessarily large scale, but make people's lives better.
Yes.
But if a company can be built and scaled to, call it 5 million a year of revenue profitably with a very small lean team, that team is going to do very, very well for themselves.
Oh yes, absolutely.
But that business,
and they might not need venture capital in the first place.
And so that's kind of my question is like, if we're in a world where there's just thousands of these types of businesses that are popping up all the time, they don't need venture capital. Is there another model that's kind of this intermediary?
I mean, venture capital can, like, I think there is a need to go earlier and earlier.
Yeah, for sure.
And developers per capita is growing very high in places outside of the main hubs and outside of the first world.
Yeah.
I have seen, like, through the Workers Launchpad program, right? Like, I have seen companies that are like an open source alternative to major SaaS products that were like 5 engineers, almost no funding, with 1 million customers across 50 countries. And, they optimize their product for the users that they are encountering, which is not what the first world will do, right? Like, none of their customers are remotely in a position to be paying the sticker price for enterprise SaaS.
Yeah.
Right. And the cost model is different. Like, and then you check up with them a couple of years later. They may or may not have raised any funding, but they were unkillable, and now they're like up to about 50 engineers. Like that is a model we're going to see more and more of.
Yeah.
Because the barriers to, like, I don't think there is a huge difference in people's innate abilities spread geographically across the world, but there is a difference in access to knowledge, and there had been historically, right? And access to training, like training people's skill sets up from childhood.
Yeah.
What we have today is we are moving in the general direction of democratizing all of the technologies, and open source is a large part of that. Because if you're a developer in the developing world, open source is open source tools are the only realistic things that you can use because of the currency difference between your native earnings and what the first world wants to charge. I mean, unless there's like free development, like when there's free developer products, that is also like a major, like if you are a company operating in the developed world today and you don't have a free developer tier, expect your adoption rate to be not great in
Yeah.
places where people can't afford you.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Logically.
Yeah.
So then how does that dynamic impact our work as investors?
I think you have to search broader
Okay.
and you have to search earlier.
Yeah.
And you have to enable people who operate in places and in areas that are not obvious. And you can't rely on pattern matching as much as investors have in the past. It's really funny. Relying on pattern matching, you're performing no better than an LLM,
Yeah.
right? And in essence, it's like, relying on pattern matching. Okay, if you average together all of the human faces on planet Earth, that will give you a really above average in attractiveness face. It's going to be a kind of conventionally attractive average face. And that's the quality of decision that an LLM will give you, and that's the quality of decision that an investor who is pattern matching is going to be able to make.
I really like that analogy.
But like the faces that we find most beautiful are striking in a way that deviate from the conventionally attractive average. Maybe they have more striking eyebrows. Maybe it's some other feature that's a little bit exaggerated, right? Like there is something special there, and those are actually the optimal solutions.
Yeah.
And so the human element here is to really search beyond and hone your intuition on what is not obvious and what is not the conventional decision.
I love that. And like, if you think about venture capital as an asset class, it kind of exists to not give you average returns, to diversify you away from average stock market returns, right? And find these crazy outliers and kind of hedge against that average risk or average rate of return.
Right.
So I really love that analogy of like LLMs are giving us just like a standard, average, conventionally attractive face. Like it's good, it's fine,
it's decent.
whatever.
It's a good first draft.
Exactly.
It's like if you're writing unit tests, that's good enough, right? Like and this goes into the desirability of different kinds of human jobs too. If it's a highly repetitive job, if it's a job that humans don't want to do, like in the vast majority of those cases, the average, the slightly above average, like conventionally attractive face kind of answer does a fantastic job at those kinds of jobs, right? The kinds of things where the human element, like a human does something striking and new, especially in art, right? Like those are highly desirable things for humans to do. Right? Like humans don't necessarily want to be doing certain kinds of jobs. And like I ask myself the question, what kind of a world do I want to live in? Like, and from an investor point of view, like most investors want to make these kinds of rational decisions. Like, does a company save money? Does a company make more money if they use this product? As opposed to, do humans want to do this job? Does this make somebody's life worse? Does this make a lot of people's lives better? Right? Like, if this is a job that sucks for humans to do, but maybe it's not a defensible moat. Maybe it's something that like other investors, for various reasons that are part of investor groupthink, don't want to invest in. Maybe we invest in that.
Yeah, maybe that's where the opportunity is.
I mean, like, if we lament the kind of world that we're going to live in, yet actively work to make it that way, like, there is some soul searching to do here, right? Yeah. Like, when you have asset allocation, right? Like, when you're allocating there at the core of this is decision making and coordination on what humans should be working on. That is a big responsibility. And humans should be working on building products that make human lives better, right? And if we systematically invest in things that make human lives worse and allocate labor to work on those products, then we are ourselves to blame if that's the world that we end up living in.
Yeah, because we made it so, because we directed
right,
the
like
incentives
it's like,
towards those
look,
things existing.
we collectively did that, right? So
Yeah.
like we collectively should think about what kind of a world do we want to live in,
Yeah.
and invest towards a world
Well,
that we
when
want
you
to live
fund
in.
things, you create incentives to work on those things.
Yes, exactly.
I never like intellectually grappled with that until this conversation. Like I kind of understood, but yeah.
Like at the end of the day, the reason capitalism exists is to solve a human coordination problem.
To align
right?
incentives towards
like doing a thing,
goals.
right?
Yeah.
Like there are other ways to organize human labor before capitalism existed, and a lot of those like work well enough in smaller groups of people, and in cases where capitalism gets into pathological edge cases, we can do things to jumpstart it back, right? Like every human coordination technology can lead to pathological edge cases, but we as humans, like what we should be trying to compute is what is it optimal for all humans to be doing? Like what kind of a future do we want to live in, and how do we use our existing coordination technologies, whether that's capitalism, whether that's public influence, whether that's writing fiction, right? Like how do we build towards that future?
Yeah. Wow. That's great. I want to kind of make sure that we can take it home here on time and move into some rapid fire. But maybe we'll have to have you back on and we'll just talk about philosophy for a couple hours, because I could probably go for another couple hours on this.
Of course.
This is great. So rapid fire, I ask you a question, you give me kind of a quick answer. What's a book, podcast, piece of content that has significantly influenced the way that you think, work, live in your day-to-day life?
So I'm currently reading Lee Kuan Yew's book, The Singapore Story, From Third World to First. I think every startup founder should read this, because nation building is a lot like building a startup, but on super, super hard mode.
Yeah.
And you can see the ways that he thought about, a lot of people don't know this, but at the time of their reluctant independence in 1965, the population was 90% uneducated, like peasantry, and 10% educated people.
Like couldn't read 90% of the country.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they were able to create a first world country in one generation. Like this is speed run, right? Like this is like best speed run of all time. And he wrote a book that has like all of his chess moves. And a lot of it's going to be particular to their situation, but like a lot of it is also thinking about what your wedge market, like you could translate it to startup terms and thinking about like what your wedge market is, how you're going to attract foreign direct investment in certain industries, and how you're going to manage the relationship between your labor force and the employers. And then also, how do you invest in the future of that next generation, so that, very carefully thinking through, right? Like he delineates, like if you don't have a system where people's, if you don't have a system where people's extra efforts pay off, then they won't be motivated to be ambitious. Yet at the same time, ability is not equally distributed.
Yeah.
Right? There's going to be some normal distribution of ability, and in a capitalistic system, you very, very quickly get a divide where people's quality of lives change very quickly. Like you get this stratification very quickly, and it tends to ossify within a generation. So how do you get the proceeds in order to invest in the future earnings of your next generation of citizens? And how do you upgrade their skill set, and just being so thoughtful about that, right? Like most people, like in the West, we're playing our chess moves less than 4 years at a time.
Yeah.
Right? He's thinking one generation at a time in terms of like how, like what are the downstream ramifications of this? And even when other nation states or companies are in a prisoner's dilemma, like defecting against you, how do you preserve that relationship so that they will cooperate with you next time? And how do you play all of your cards so accurately and even like tell us where his missteps had been, that like it's just every startup founder should read it.
I'm sold. Yeah, I want to read it, not even as a startup founder, but just as a history nerd.
Yeah.
It sounds fascinating. One of my best friends from college, and like also one of the best engineers I know, grew up in Singapore. So that's testament to how well they've done. Wow, great answer. What was it called? Third World to First?
From Third World to First,
From
the
Third
Singapore
World to
story.
First, the Singapore Story by Lee Kuan Yew.
Yeah.
Very cool. Next rapid fire question. If you had a personal mug, like I have this Jake mug, you had to put a few words or a phrase on it, what would go on the Jade Wang mug?
Oh man, that's a good. I honestly don't know, but one of our friends did give Kenton a mug. Because it was something he would frequently say, which is little endian is the correct endian.
Okay.
So when you write your numbers from left to right, the leftmost digit is the largest place, right? Like if it's like 15, the ones place is like the tens, which is like bigger than the 5. Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, if you're in a computer, it could go either way, right? Like there are some languages where you do like the small numbers first, and then you go to the larger number. And if you're if you're on a computer and you are computing numbers and you need to like add spaces or like as the number changes and you need to allocate more memory, it is more efficient to be storing the small number first.
Interesting. So that's what would go in your mug, you think?
Well, that's already on Kenton's mug.
Yeah. Could be a good answer.
I don't have a mug that says something very profound that way.
If it's important to you or resonates with you, then it's a great answer. So yeah, and it kind of is your mug. I mean, it's in your house. You know?
Yeah.
Great. What is a common misconception people have about AI that you think is just dead wrong, that you want to dispel right now?
Oh man, there are a lot of different camps that are philosophically differently aligned on AI right now. Whether that's on AI safety, whether we should accelerate or decelerate, and also, and like largely, there is this notion of the zero-sum game, and that's just not how technology is in the world, right? Like, just like calling back to earlier, we are humans on planet Earth solving a human labor coordination problem. There is this idea that people have out there that nations, or like we like one country or another will control a technology. Like we humans on planet Earth, none of us, like we all control fire, right? Yeah. Like we all have the wheel, we all have printing presses, we all have vehicles, we all have the internet, we all have computers and internet. Like we humans on planet Earth have to find a way to collaboratively build a peaceful and coexisting future together. In no scenario is mass death good for people, right? Like, otherwise, like Thanos would be the good guy.
Yeah.
And so things that edge us closer to World War III, because people, like a lot of people have sort of like brainwashed themselves into thinking that it's a zero-sum game. that if one side wins, then another side loses. And you see this in companies that are in similar spaces to each other when they see each other as competitors, that one must win for the other one to lose. But what you are actually, like, yes, you're playing for different teams, but like, actually what you're really trying to do is do the best possible job you can solving a specific problem for your customer and end user, right? Like, if you do a better job, like, then on some level you deserve to win that customer.
Yeah.
Right? And like, if you and maybe you aren't actually competitors. Maybe you're actually solving different use cases. And if you actually are solving the same use cases, isn't it globally more efficient to be working together than against each other? Like, every cooperation technology has a pathological edge case. Like the Great Depression and like when you run into things like stagflation, like those are pathological edge cases that capitalism can run into, right? And like the union busting violence that happened in the early industrial age, right? Like, it doesn't have to be this way. If you only studied those edge cases in the West, like, you wouldn't know how Japanese unions work today, where you have a collaborative approach to finding and how labor unions in Singapore work, right? Like, there's ways to find collaborative approaches to find a better optimum for everyone involved. And the same thing exists for every cooperation technology, including countries, including nation states. Right? Like, there exists a solution where everyone peacefully coexists and is productive and does good work.
It's like prisoner's dilemma, tying back to the beginning of the
Right, like,
conversation. Cooperate.
Right, let's find a solution where humans can cooperate. Like, there is no way that the optimal solution for our next generation of humankind is the largest two economies on planet Earth going to war with each other. Like, that is like globally bad for everybody.
Yeah. Well, great answer. It's not zero sum. Everyone can win.
Yeah.
Succeed. And that's, I think, what we've seen historically globally, right? The whole world is now more educated, longer lifespans, less infant mortality, etc. Because, yeah, technology in general is positive sum. Moving into closing really quick. First, thank you for the fascinating, awesome conversation. Really appreciate your time. For people that want to, or I guess before that, like, what's next for you? What are you excited about? What's kind of on the roadmap for Jade, professionally, personally, etc.?
Make some investments,
So? Make some
talk to
investments.
founders, planning a trip coming up. And actually, a lot of my cycles are thinking about early childhood education these days.
Nice.
So thinking that through, because I have 2 young children, and thinking through what is optimal, which is surprisingly hard, because there are a lot of children are actually very often equipped with a high level of agency skills that are hard to teach later, but you have to not train it out of them.
Yeah.
They know that they want to be in the driver's seat of their life. And it's the outside world that, like, the convenience of parents and the convenience of schools that tell them they have to do what they're told. Entrepreneurs are a class of people who aren't doing what they're told to do. Like, the entrepreneurial talent is latent in people, right? Like, it's there being, like, people who aren't doing what they're told, who have these
super high agency.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's super important to not train that out of people, or to help people find that again, whether that's through meditation or other means, right? Like, I really hope that like, maybe there is just the right stimulus, a piece of fiction or art. Like, there exists some work that can probably fine-tune that in existing humans, and to flip that switch so that people get into the driver's seat of their lives. And but as a parent, it's also a struggle, because you want them to brush their teeth.
Yeah. There's got to be some level of guardrails there. Or else
And
they're
you
going
want
to
the-
eat Hershey's Kisses for breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
Right.
Yeah.
And you want them to do it of their own volition. So the level of Jedi mind tricks you have to do, you just have to super level up on that.
Awesome. For anyone that wants to connect with you, follow your work, what's the best way to do that? It's Twitter /
Oh
X,
gosh, I haven't been
LinkedIn?
active on any of the socials lately, but I guess, yeah,
Do you have a blog?
I used to blog, man.
Figured, yeah.
I used to blog. I haven't in a really long time because the nature of what I blog about has also, or the nature of what I've been thinking about is, you know what? I'll give you links to put in the description once I.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, sounds
yeah.
good. Oh, links in the description to follow Jade's work. Awesome. Any final words? That's all I had.
Oh man. Oh gosh, a lot of founders we got to schedule for Orange Cloud Angels. Oh, got to do that after my trip. Yeah.
Well, thanks so much for being here. This was awesome.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Absolutely.